Sorry, okay, so our next presentation is Gordon Guthrie, who's the founder of Hypernumbers, and you're going to talk about building applications in the cloud using spreadsheets.
I'm going to do a live demo, so I'm taking my life and possibly your patience into my hands, but never mind, upwards and onwards. Spreadsheets are a very ubiquitous part of the world, and I bet there isn't a single person in the room who doesn't use spreadsheets. And Hypernumbers are like spreadsheets, but better, and it's kind of easier to show than do. Easier to show than explain. So let me just do that. You'll all be familiar with spreadsheets, pretty straightforward. A Hypernumber spreadsheet is no different to anybody else's. So let's take a very traditional spreadsheet that you would use. Traditionally, the most common use is to manage lists. So imagine we had a little list of people to talk to, speak to about opportunity. You very often see this as a very, very common paradigm of just simply managing lists. So you're pretty much, there's no reason not to use Excel if you're just building a basic list. What I'm going to show you is how this would be different in Hypernumbers. And the way it'd be different is we could do this, instead of a simple spreadsheet, we'd do it as a call center. So let's just do that. Let's just build a call center live. So we kind of do things slightly differently in Hypernumbers. We tend not to use the row-based approach that you'd be familiar with. We tend to build things on separate pages. So if I was building a contact center, I would just do, I'd collect the details I wanted, and then I would make it a page. What I'm going to do is build a little, we've got Excel on the desktop and we can use Google Docs in the cloud, but Google Docs is actually open office under the covers, so it's a very traditional desktop, whereas Hypernumbers is a native spreadsheet built from the ground up. And you kind of see that in action once we get to this bit. So what I'm able to do is take this spreadsheet and make it in a form with one click. So I now have a working form that I can lock down. And I need a volunteer here with a telephone that's not switched off. So who wants to be my guinea pig? So I'm building a call center. Stefan, right?
Yeah.
And what's your number, Stefan? 608. So I got a couple. This is a form-based approach, but I can also one click if I basically have three modes. I've got the spreadsheet mode, which is the mode that I can control things in. I have the wiki page, which I can make forms, and I have the third one is a web page, so I can deploy the same technology secure, the same information securely to different people. And to make a call center, it's pretty straightforward. I use a function called phone out, and I'm just going to use B9 and make it a GB. And what that does is that puts a soft phone on the page. I then go to my wiki page, and now I can make a call. Answer it. Hello? How are you doing? Right, okay, so pretty straightforward. And what we do, because we care about logging a lot, we log everything. So that call is then logged, and I actually have, if I kick this into a view page, I can, I've actually recorded it. So assuming that, I didn't test this either, assuming you've got an MP3 player, that should now play that call back. So that's an approach we take for everything. We log every change for every cell is automatically logged. So it doesn't matter what change you've made. The whole thing with spreadsheets. How do I get people to put data in without breaking everything? We solve that by putting forms. How do I check who did break it? We solve that by I've got a log of every change going along. And but I've got a note of every time every cell was changed, and it's logged against my user. So I basically build a loggable thing. the way this then works is I'd save this as a template, and we'll call it new fin. And what I do is I can then instantiate copies of that using another function. So I use a button called create.button. What I'm doing is this is a little URL. This tells the button how to create new copies of this template. And what I'm saying is I'm going to create. I'm going to create it under the URL person, and then I'm going to give it an auto-incrementing number. So that will give me a create button. So now on a web page, when I press that, I get a new instance. You get the thing. I can now create. You notice how I've created it under this URL. Person 001. The next one will be 002, 003, and I can build that. I can take a traditional row-based spreadsheet and upload it and create then a call center that can be used by 110, 200 people at the same time from the same data. So rather than bore the living bejesus out of you, I'll show you a little one I've built here, and this is using functions. So this is a very simple call center. It's got the same thing. I've got some notes. I've got my calls. I've got menus that flow me around. These are all done with functions. So the whole call center here is built in 42 functions, and you can build it under no pressure in like 10 minutes. So what we're trying to do as a company then is it's pretty straightforward. What we're saying is that there's lots and lots of business processes that you do manually in spreadsheets. You can now automate them and you can build systems, whereas previously you'd have to hire 2 metric barrel loads of software developers. I mean, to get inbound or outbound call center functionality for a couple of hundred people now, your opening price is about £250,000, where it has traditionally been. So with Hypernumbers, you cut away a lot of that. And you're looking at things like almost anything. There's a significant proportion of any business that involves building manual processes and spreadsheets because they're non-core systems. And with Hypernumbers, you can now automate and structure those yourself. You can publish them securely, and you can use all the flexibility of spreadsheets and all the speed of creation without the sort of setup cost of using IT people. Historically, the people at Hypernumbers were all ex-retail banking, so I'm sure lots of you are wholesale banking down in London, but we're all retail. So I met Stephen at Direct Line Financial Services, where he developed the remortgage product back in '95, which is now half the remortgage market. He went on to Standard Life Bank, and I stayed behind, and then we met again at Intelligent Finance, if.com, and then tried to start a bank and various things. But basically, from benchmarking perspectives, a benchmark is basically do something you've done previously and measure your performance. So our internal benchmark for value is to ask Stephen, he's a spreadsheet guy, he's not a developer, how long would it take him to build a mortgage bank? And he thinks he can build a mortgage bank for about the size of Airdrie Savings Bank, 6,000 customers, internet, call center integrated on his own, deploy it, build it in 6 weeks on his Lonio. So you can really rip out costs for a lot of things. If you can express something as spreadsheet documents, you can now start building quite sophisticated applications pretty quickly. And the aim is to really democratize business process management and reorganizing. So kind of what it means for people, I'm not quite clear. The audience is a mixture of lawyers and various people. But if you're a spreadsheet user out there with a subject matter expertise, whether it's financing, whether it's tax, whether it's accounting, you can basically now monitor. One of the problems that Daniel talked about when he spoke last month, or one of his questions was, how do you, if you build a model, the model that he talked about of building seating models for the Olympics in a spreadsheet, once you hand it over to the customer then owns the IP and can resell it. Well, with Hypernumbers, you can now capture that information. You can build a system and then resell it if you're a subject matter specialist. And you can monetize and try and sell the same thing again and again and again, and go away from basically a per hourly thing to a transactional base. We really want to get into the era of mass customization. So the whole startup scene is about, people think there's going to be 1,000 applications, each which have 1 million users, and I want to have one of them. Well, with Hypernumbers, we think there should be 1 million applications with 1,000 users, and you can now build really custom stuff. So the bank that Stephen and I tried to start, the week before September 2001, the 4th September 2001, the week before the markets went tits up, the attack on the US, we left to start a bank, which was a May luck. Next time we tried to go to capital markets was the week of Lehman's went down the pan, so we're pretty much We're pretty much masters of fundraising. Our timing is great. But
when are you starting up again?
well, we're looking to do it now, so I'd be selling everything. The bank we were going to start, we were going to try and do the remortgage product basically consolidated the purchaser. So the purchaser used to buy the valuation and the legal fees and the mortgage as a unit, and the remortgage product took those two other things and put them behind the bank, and was created by reorganising that business process. We said, what would happen if we did that from the seller's perspective by merging estate agency and banking? And we were looking to build a second homes abroad business where you would buy a house in France from a bank come estate agent that would wrap up the legal process. And we were looking to raise about 60 million because we'd need that, blah, blah. Well, with Hypernumbers, you could build a system like that yourself. You'd still need to raise the capital to finance it, but big things can happen. And you could build really good, strong boutique businesses on very custom products. And also, particularly, it's very good at, it's interesting, the presentation you gave earlier, you list all these sources of finance, but you never mentioned customers, who are, of course, the best source of finance. And what we try and do, you probably don't know, I'm from a very obscure town in Scotland, Linlithgow, and there's more people from Linlithgow here. And we don't have all your happy financing. So in Scotland, we really focus on what we call customers and them giving us money, which we like. And with this, you can start building products and get them speed to market and trying to get your customers to develop. And even for certain products, if you do want to be a million user market, if you can test it on a pretty ropey, lower quality system, but you can prove your market before you go out there, then you're in a good position. With our game, you've first got to build your spreadsheet, which is non-trivial. Then you've got to demonstrate that it has value. So we have operational systems with thousands of pages, major systems. So we kind of prove the value proposition. We understand that we can now demonstrate we can build real systems. What we're now doing is the growth proposition. We're going to have to talk to people, so that's kind of why I'm here. We're pre-launch, we're cash flow positive, and we're looking for a number of things. We're looking for people who want to join our private beta. It's pay for beta, because guess what? People who pay you tend to have a lot stronger and more valuable opinions. We don't really believe in the sort of jazz hands beta stuff. Hey, cool. Maybe if you have a problem, then let's kind of solve that. So looking for customers. If this problem resonates with you. At some stage, we're going to be hiring. Now, we're always happy to hire, but the flip side of hiring is paying. We're not so good on that. Cash flow positive is all about having some cash in and less cash out, with a focus on less cash out. So, but at some stage, we're going to be growing as we take on Microsoft and Google and leave them in the dust. And at some stage, we're going to be no funding round, so prepare for the forthcoming economic apocalypse. If you ping me on LinkedIn and say, I saw you at New Finance, I'll respond, or follow me on Twitter, or come and talk to me later. So, questions?
I'm interested in your technology stack. What are you running on the back end? And are you using any JavaScript MVC framework or anything?
I was asked this question before. What stack were you using? We use a Hypernumbers database underneath a Hypernumbers server programmed in a Hypernumbers programming language. The stack that people use is designed to make it easier for software programmers to develop. Well, we're trying to make it possible for end users to develop. So all that stack is basically backend is Erlang. We use Amnesia as the data store, but the programming language is an expression-based pattern matching language. You use Excel expressions. So the whole stack. It's one of the things. You've got to build the whole stack from the ground up, and to shed loads of JavaScript to the front end.
Okay, that sounds interesting. My next question was, have you done any user experience testing where, because a lot of the people that are using spreadsheets, that's really their technical limitation. So who do you plan to build the sites for them?
No.
Or how do you plan to train all these people?
Pretty straightforward. It's a single web page. There are 8 functions, 5.5 are identical to Excel. We have 125 Excel-compatible functions. The key commands are the same as Excel. The rule is make it like Excel, and if you can't do that because it's on the web, make it like Google Docs. So everything is basically Excel. There's no scripting, there's no VBA, there's no programming languages. It's just basically this spreadsheet is it. There is nothing else. It's just like a spreadsheet. And the monkey work is all done with. There's 2 things that the monkey work's done with. One is that you're operating in a hierarchical structure, which is when you typically organize spreadsheets, you typically have a hierarchical file system, and you put things in and you navigate through the file system. Well, Hypernumbers is hierarchical like that, and you put your things into the URL, but you have functions that allow you to query it, so they're the equivalent of saying things like, go to the file system and find all the unpaid invoices, or give me a list of the things that Bob worked on last July. And that uses an expression language based on queries. So that's the key part you need to learn. And the rest of it is literally, like I said, there's all the ones that have got new next to them are Hypernumbers functions, but the rest are all basically Excel compatible. So it's just everything is make it like Excel, make it like Excel. We're currently doing user testing tomorrow, but people are finding it quite easy.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Okay.
Hi there. Really quick question. It's a rather stupid one, ideally, but I'm assuming that all the shortcut keys are exactly the same as Excel.
We're about 15 or 20 of them, but there's about 78 in Excel. So we put them in when people moan. So,
because I'm just thinking, as myself, I many years ago, it was one of those things where I pretty much earned a living by building financial models in Excel, and the whole shortcut key and leaving the mouse behind was the key. And I'm watching you navigate using the mouse a lot, and I'm thinking there's no shortcut keys being used. And just from the amount of people I know who are comfortable in building stuff in Excel, it's all done with a keyboard.
But the value is in deploying, not in building. So you build once and deploy many times. And it's about doing the minimum amount of work to get to the customer point, and then and it's like hanging a door. You put it up, and then when it jams, you think it off. We've added a few more, but it's not really
fair enough.
a point.
Just another question is, in regards to Hypernumbers, what is your route to market as opposed to what's the business model? I'm not quite sure as to how your revenue model...
Monthly recurring fee.
As in terms of licensing the software out to people?
It's in the cloud.
In the cloud.
So you turn it on, turn it off. Utility pricing, subscription pricing.
Subscription based.
And then things like telephony are an add-on.
Have you ever attempted to sit there and say, when you use that example of call center building, where you say it's 250,000 to get that equivalent in the market? Have you ever attempted to say, I can do that for 200?
Well, it's not. The strategic goal is to retain the stuff that has 85% gross margin and outsource things that has 20% gross margin. Now, in the early days, when you've got no customers, that's not so the case. But the strategic goal is 100 million customers at 85% gross margin. So on the way there, I will, dance in a feather boa if that's what's required. I mean, I'm not particularly fussy about money, to be honest. Depends on how much pony you need in the cloud, and then, do you need SSL, yada yada. It's all backed up as well, so there's all that stuff.
Thanks. Thanks very much.